Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Power of Our Planet webinar. Exceptionally, this webinar will be an hour and a half long. Positive Luxury is very proud to host a virtual screening of Our Planet, Our Business. This film, commissioned by WWF, is inspired by the original Our Planet Netflix series, and it raises one of the most important questions of our time. How can business help to tackle the world environmental crisis? Following the screening, our CEO, Verde Nieto, will be in conversation with three amazing panelists. Anya Hindmarch, the founder of the eponymous brand, Paula Chin, a sustainable materials specialist at WWF-UK, and Rhiannon Shah, a business lead on Our Planet team. And before we start, Rhiannon will tell us a quick word about the film. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you very much. We're really thrilled to be with Positive Luxury Brands today to share this film with you. I'm just going to give a very, very quick intro to the Our Planet project so you kind of understand where the film came from. And before I start with that, I'll just give you a tiny bit of a word about WWF. I think a lot of people know of us as the animal adoption people, saving pandas and elephants and orangutans. But what we do behind the scenes is a lot of work with government, with other NGOs, and also with corporate partners and businesses around the world to really help people on this journey to sustainability, to invest in both people and planet. And we realized early on as an organization that it's not just about saving one species. We really have to look at all the species in the world and all the landscapes in the world. And it's becoming more and more urgent. And it's great that there's a lot of attention on these topics now, but it's even more urgent than I think a lot of people realize. And that's why we really did the series, the Our Planet series, and why we partnered with Netflix as well. As everybody knows, it's a global brand. It's in 190 different territories. I think the latest stats are something crazy like 182 million subscribers, 16 million of those have just signed up in the first 3 months of this year. So now it's probably like double that with lockdown. But basically, it's a global story that has to be told on a massive level, so people really understand what's at stake here. And the 8-part series that is on Netflix and also on YouTube, thanks to Netflix putting it on YouTube during lockdown, is basically kind of going into depth into all the great landscapes that we have in the world. So our coastal seas, our high seas, like you see behind me, grasslands, frozen, the jungles and the forests. To really, it's not just a natural history series where you see great pictures of tigers and everything in the wild. You actually understand really the landscapes that are threatened and why we need them, but also how they work together. And it's 4 years in the making, so it's a huge, massive project. And it's revealed some really amazing sites like the walrus scene from Frozen, which got a lot of press at the time, which had never been filmed before. And in fact, a lot of scientists around the world didn't really realize that this kind of stuff was happening. So when we launched the series in 2019, so about a bit earlier than this time last year, a lot of businesses came to us as well and said, well, we think this is great. We really understand why this is important, but I can't get my colleagues to understand. I don't know how to describe why they should help save these landscapes as well. Or we had other businesses come to us and say, it's very sad that orangutans are dying, but what does that have to do with me? I'm an accountant, or I'm a professional services company, or I'm in HR. Why is this relevant for me? Why should my business care? And so that's why we created this film, Our Planet, Our Business, to basically take that story into the workplace. Because we know you can't watch 8 hours of a lovely Netflix series. So we created this 40-minute film to really help businesses understand why you need nature, why nature is fundamental to our economy. And we tried to speak the same language of business so we could really show why it's relevant for you. And basically, we took a lot of the great footage from the Netflix series, but we also paired it with the rock stars of our world. So the Kate Raworth, who's an amazing economist, Christina Figueres, who's the architect of the Paris Agreement, and people like Johan Rockström, who are famous climate scientists. And these are our rock stars, and we kind of wanted to bring them into your world so you can understand that there are people who are thinking about business and thinking about the economy and thinking about the world differently. So we hope that you enjoy the film. It's very much topical right now as we're talking about building back better, because it really points to a way that businesses can do things differently if we all work together and if we kind of push for change. So we hope you enjoy the film, and we'll be around later on for any questions at the end.
Thank you, Rhiannon. We are now ready to watch the film, and if your connection on Zoom is not great, I've just shared the link to the film in the chat box, so you can watch it directly on WWF website. And please let's all regroup in the room, in the Zoom room, at 2:45. Thank you very much all, and enjoy.
When this film launched a few, kind of a year ago, this was an unrealistic possibility. In the last 45 days, we actually have experienced this firsthand. And the fact that we have read the news, we have watched the documentaries, we have read the newspapers, and we actually know that our planet have regenerated in small doses when we have been locked away. So there is a lot of truth in this. It's not just like science. And I'd like to start the conversation with you, Anya, because you are an incredible designer. Like it says in the back of your wall, strategy, creativity will eat strategy for breakfast. And that's what you are, like an incredible creative. And you're an environmentalist, although you're a reluctant environmentalist because you don't like the claim of it. But you started a long time ago, back in '97, if I am not confused, with I'm Not a Plastic Bag. And, very quietly you have worked, into embedded sustainability within your business, and you're very honest about what you're doing and also what you still haven't done. And this is why it makes you incredibly different from many designers today. So I wanted to ask you if you can share with us a little bit about your journey. And then you recently, last year, you launched I Am a Plastic Bag, which is a fantastic project. So yes, tell us a little bit more about your journey, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. And I have to say I was almost in tears at the end of that film. I've already seen it before, of course, but it's so, well, kind of emotional, and it's such common sense, isn't it? I mean, it's just not rocket science, this, frankly. We just have to do it. Yes, I don't call myself environmentalist at all. I am just the kind of common man in business, sort of trying to pick my way through what I can do. And I think that the first time I started thinking about it in a big way was in 2007, actually, when we were approached about the I Am Not a Plastic Bag project, which was the time, I think, when all of us were thinking, we were hearing this word environment, sustainability, and just not quite sure what to do about it as an individual. And I suddenly had a sort of a light bulb moment where I thought, actually, I could use the bit that I want to pick off, the bit that I could, if you like, make a difference to, I had hoped, was the idea of plastic bags and single-use plastic, and the kind of crazy nature of abuse of plastic. And so we went about this project called I'm Not a Plastic Bag, with a simple aim of awareness around the subject. And that was really the very simple, naive aim, was just to say, don't keep taking plastic bags, reduce, reuse, recycle. That was our message. And we piggybacked, if you like, the platform of the IT bag in those days, one I hate, and we put it on the right arms, and the amazing sort of distribution and so on, and it went mad. And so I think 80,000 people queued in one day for that bag in the UK, and it rolled on around the world, in Japan and Hong Kong and New York. And I'm embarrassed to say, I think 30 people went to hospital in Taiwan because it was a sort of rather silly stampede that closed down the shopping mall. And all of that's irrelevant, obviously. And of course, we stopped it. We don't want people to be hurt. However, it made a difference. And the British Retail Consortium said that actually the number of plastic bags used pre the project was about 10 billion approximately, which reduced to 6. So the point is, fashion does give a platform, and I felt that was really what I could do. So roll ahead quickly to 2020, here we are now, and the problem, frankly, is far from solved. And so we felt we wanted to pick off the subject again, really, and yet the conversation has moved on, really, to the circularity of materials. And I think there's about 8 billion tons of plastic on the planet right now. So it's how can we reuse those and keep them in circulation and stop them going to landfill. So there's obviously so many areas on that brilliant film that we all need to chip into across the business. And I'm trying to look at every single one, but I just have simply used what I have as a platform to try and communicate really one part of that. I've learned loads and it's been fascinating, but that's why I started, in answer to your question.
Thank you so much. And I mean, talking about waste, I'd like to ask you, Paula, on the film we've seen this quote from economist Kate Rothworth saying, waste is just a resource in the wrong place. So what are the concrete steps that both small and big businesses can take to tackle to eliminate waste and develop not just a circular economy, but actually a regenerative economy?
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, firstly, for inviting me to be part of this panel. I think is a really important conversation we need to have, and you hit the nail on the head. Waste isn't waste. You know, when we throw things away, they said in the film, there is no away. Waste is just a resource that we've taken from the planet that we mistreat and abuse at the end of its life. You know, the very commonly known waste hierarchy, which should probably be renamed the resource use hierarchy. You know, it's very clear it's about avoiding using materials in the first place, reducing what we do use, reusing, and of course, you know, I'm absolutely thrilled to be on this panel with Anya because I remember the insane queues around the block for the I'm Not a Plastic Bag. It kick-started really a reuse revolution, but ahead of its time. And of course, recycling. Anything below that point in the hierarchy shouldn't even factor into our thinking. So incineration, for instance, unless there's health and safety considerations, we should not be incinerating resources. We shouldn't be sending valuable resources to landfill. The challenge we have with the hierarchy is that with avoidance, it's tough because we live in a capitalist consumerist society and people are just encouraged to buy. And post-COVID as well, you know, governments are looking to pre-COVID consumption levels as a means to rescuing economies. But of course, with high consumption comes high resource usage. And, you know, a recent fact which has been floating around social media is that we have enough clothing on the planet right now to clothe the next 6 generations of the human race. You know, I think if that's the case, we have a responsibility to challenge ourselves on whether we need more stuff. Another handbag, another pair of jeans. But my key messages would be, you know, to design products using the minimal amount of material possible, to use recycled materials as far as possible, as this can significantly reduce the embedded carbon in a product. Anya's I Am a Plastic Bag is a great example of that, being made from plastic bottles. Design the product to be used as many times as possible. This is where fast fashion falls down and where the luxury market has a big role to play, as items can be considered classic investment pieces which should last a lifetime. A Louis Vuitton bag never goes out of fashion. And specifically, design with circularity in mind. 80% of a product's impact is determined at that design stage. So there shouldn't be a single new product launch which doesn't consider how it will be dealt with at the end of its life. And we should be designing products in a way which makes it easy to recover as much of the valuable materials used in it as possible. So really take the time to understand how the materials you're using can be recovered and recycled, stay informed on developments in recycling infrastructure, local collection systems. Many brands are, you know, doing their own initiatives where they've got take-back schemes and they have better control of the waste arising from their products and they can repurpose some of those materials. In January this year, the 2020 Circularity Gap Report launched, and it tells us that the global economy is currently only 8.6% circular. We flip that on its head, it means we're losing 91.4% of the planet's resources in order to support our lifestyles, and hand in hand with that are the devastating impacts on climate and biodiversity. And we need to think about the environmental impacts of a product through its whole life cycle, not just when it becomes waste. So the World Bank estimates that the fashion industry accounts for up to 20% of wastewater, for instance. It requires 2,700 litres of water to produce a cotton shirt and up to 10,000 litres of water to make a single pair of jeans. And the fashion industry is estimated to contribute between 8 to 10% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. Much of those embedded emissions are in the raw materials. But, you know, I think it's that holistic end-to-end thinking which is going to allow us to continue enjoying the products we buy, because let's face it, you know, they bring joy to our life, but we need to minimize the impact of bringing those products to market and ensure nothing goes to waste at the end of it. So organizations like Positive Luxury can champion brands who think about the total life cycle of their products and what they can be doing to minimize the environmental impacts along the way.
Thank you so much, Paula. And before actually going to Rhiannon, I like to say one point, because I mean, the environmental impact of the fashion industry is absolutely devastating, yet the social cost of not having that industry will be even greater. And we are about to see how the world is about to fall into one of the greatest depression ever seen to mankind. And, you know, although the capitalist system is perhaps broken, there is a business case to say that you have to have sustainable consumption with sustainable production. So although we should not be chasing double-digit growth, we should be chasing profits, because to be honest with you, being able to earn money as a business or making a profitable business is what allowed to pay salaries. In turn, those people be able to support their families and their children and sometimes their parents or extended families. So there is an economic system that right now, as we see the world to stand still, it's broken. So I think the case of sustainable production, it's absolutely imperative, without penalizing companies to keep producing more. I agree, we don't need 6, 7, 10 collections a year, but we still need collections and to be bought those collections in order to keep the economy going. Otherwise, the devastated, I think, systemic kind of devastation we'll see from an economic place is going to be really bad from the developing world, which is where I come from, as well as the developed world. And before going to you, Rhiannon, I'd like to ask a question to Anya, because, you know, your logo, your motto is progress, not perfection. And I think this is part of that. It's like, how does it resonate with you as a person or as a brand today, this idea of having a successful, profitable business, but at the same time, minimizing the environmental impact on this?
Well, I mean, everything you say is right, both of you, everything you both say is right. And it's a real conundrum because, of course, the bit that scares me sort of post-COVID now in the sort of very sort of different world we're in, of course, is that poverty is a massive threat. And actually, one of my biggest concerns, I just felt pre-COVID that we were really getting traction on changing the way companies are behaving, and there was huge pressure and progress, proper, you know, I think progress, and it's amazing how once it gets going, it becomes, there's a momentum. And of course now I'm really worried that it's going to slip down everyone's priority list, really, with the fact that employers are obviously going to be working very hard to keep jobs, and people are just going to be desperately trying to, you know, to put food on the table. It's going to be quite a rough ride, I think, as we transition back and, you know, survive the fact that, you know, I mean, these economies we've spent so much money, it's terrifying, sort of trying to keep everyone safe during this period. So it's a real challenge. I think, however, that there is absolutely a solution to this, which is that we're going to have to get through this re-entry. It's going to be a tough old time, for sure. But you know, it's about good growth and good profit. I mean, I'm a great believer in profit that employs people and keeps everything growing. But it's changing the conversation to being about good profit and good growth. It's absolutely unsustainable and unthinkable. And I'm so proud of the younger generation, frankly, for holding, you know, me as a 52-year-old to account. I mean, it's fantastic. My kids are literally, I'm like this, you know, anything I do, and it's brilliant. And they will not support businesses. They will not allow businesses to actually be successful, be profitable, unless we behave properly. I mean, it's what I want to do anyway. It's what we all want to do, but it's not, a lot of people just chase profit. And I think there is a period of sort of transition, if we park COVID for a second, but a period of transition where I think there's no reason why you can't be much more successful whilst pursuing good growth and good profit. So that's sustainable behavior, transparent supply chains, you know, starting with actually sustainability within your workforce and your community, which I think is, you know, the 101. There is probably going to be a period of transition where perhaps the customer has to pay a little bit more for something better and more responsibly sourced. And perhaps the supplier, the brand, has to actually make a little bit less. There's probably going to be a little bit of a sort of an in-between period, which I think we were actually already going through. I mean, it is buy less, buy better is absolutely the right way forward. Don't not buy. We need to be making money to be able to employ people. That's really, really key. So I totally believe this is possible, but we are going to go through a bit of a rough ride post-COVID, and we've just got to hold the faith and stick to what we've got to do. Because frankly, you know, you think what we've, sorry, last point, but you think what we've all sacrificed for COVID, which is frankly a much tinier threat than the risk of an hostile planet. I mean, it's just not even comparable, and yet we've all given up so much and sacrificed so much. we can do it. We prove to ourselves what we can do. And that for me, in a funny way, is a rather wonderful moment. Sorry, I'll stop talking now. Quite passionate, as you can tell.
No, that is absolutely wonderful. And that is right. I mean, the triple bottom line was coined by John Elkington a long time ago, which is about people, planet, profit. And I even co-author a book with the same name many years ago. So, you know, it's like you said, it's possible. And I think, and I hope that many companies now will be into that path. And this is a question to you, Rhiannon, in terms of how do you start? So we've seen zero carbon, minimize the space we use, return the oceans to good health, eliminate waste, and reimagining success. And this is all about innovation, but it's so big. So how do you get this into the CEO agendas? How do you incentivize business, and where can a business owner start when they want to do this people, planet, profit bottom line approach?
Well, it's a lot to tackle at once. I think we're really glad that people are tackling carbon and plastic now. It's a really good start, but there's lots of other impacts that a business has. Paula and Anya have both mentioned, like the impact on water, the impact on land, you know, deforestation in supply chains, the impact of like where you put your pension, your company pension, your private pension. There are so many different things to tackle. I think it's basically about understanding the overall goal is we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by half. Everybody knows that. We have to reduce the impact of production and consumption by half. And our goal as WWF is to have nature on the path to recovery by 2030. So it's these sustainable development goals. So there's lots of roadmaps that are kind of available. But I guess as business owners, you just really need to look at the impact that your business is having. Where are your biggest impacts? Like, is that on water? Is that on, you know, the ocean? Where exactly are you having your biggest impact? And then working to reduce those. So you measure what you're doing now and then working actively to reduce it. And whether that's, you know, reducing how much you put on the market, or sourcing better materials, you know, as Anya said, you know, buying better products will ultimately help the planet, will ultimately help invest in those communities that are creating those products. But it's also maybe also about assessing your dependencies, like what are you dependent on? And there are companies out there who are doing some amazing things, like for example, Interface Carpets. They're a B2B carpet and tile manufacturer. They actually are now putting in a lot of resources to finding out, for example, you know, they want to be like a forest, they said. They want to replenish and clean the water more. So they want to put more water back into the world than they take, and they want to clean up even more. So they're kind of taking an active role in putting back better as well. So it's not just building themselves back better as a business, but it's also putting back into the landscape more than what they've taken. And we see more and more companies who are kind of trying to do that actively, to try and basically minimize, not just minimize their impact, but also to kind of give back to the world as well. So I think that's a good way of starting, is just looking at other companies who are doing it right, learning from competitors, learning from industry. There's a coalition also called Business for Nature, which is a coalition of really progressive businesses who are all working on this agenda, and they have, you know, a bunch of schemes you can kind of sign up to on water, on deforestation, and that kind of thing. So learning from others is important, but also using your voice. I think that's really important, because there are so many businesses who really want to do this, who know that it's the right thing to do. Speaking up and saying that they want change, telling governments, you know, because this kind of stuff does cost money. You know, if you're a Marks and Spencer's, you've got a fantastic sustainability plan, you've had it for 10 years, but it's expensive to do that. So your products are going to be more expensive. But if the government could kind of level the playing field and make it mandatory for people to do this, it makes it far easier for the market to move really, really quickly. So it's about using your voice and speaking up on these important issues as well.
Thank you so much. And I like to ask questions to Paula, because obviously you said it really well, you know, this is expensive and requires innovation, and sometimes the development time is quite lengthy. But it's all about which materials and where to pick and how to manufacture. So, I mean, in terms of innovation, can you share with us, Paula, in terms of what is the new innovation in terms of materials, in terms of recycling, packaging? What have you seen coming through, and what can we expect actually post-COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation is one of those really exciting, sexy words that people go, oh, it's really innovative, and it always makes headline news. But I would caveat that, because actually innovation around new materials isn't always necessarily beneficial to the environment, because a new material made from a novel source or a bio-based source, for example, you know, seaweed is big at the moment in packaging. You know, we have this desperation to find these new wonder materials, which we think is going to solve the world's problems, but in fact, the environmental impacts of sourcing those new materials could be as great or even worse than some of the materials we currently use. All materials have their impact, so it's not as simple as switching to an alternative one. And it really still goes back to these principles of avoid, reduce, reuse and recycle. Also, managing the end of life of new materials can be complex, especially within the existing waste infrastructures. So I would say, you know, beware the claims of innovative materials. It doesn't necessarily have to be a brand new material from a brand new source. It can be, you know, repurposing of existing materials that we use. That's still innovation. And beware the greenwashing in this space as well. You know, it's really important to look into where the material is being sourced from, how it's being produced, you know, the sort of energy and water consumption through the manufacture. Because actually the majority of materials that businesses currently work with are fit for purpose, but, you know, as already mentioned, as well as these new materials, we need to think about minimizing their impact through their life cycle. So with current materials, you know, really embed that into your thinking. Novel materials can add complexity to a system which is already struggling to deal with the materials which are in play from a waste perspective. And also in a post-COVID world, I believe key innovations will be more about creating new commercially sound business models, especially around facilitating reuse and repair. You know, pre-COVID, we were already seeing huge increases in the vintage and second-hand markets. Clothes leasing schemes are becoming more popular. I read an interesting article about the psychology of ownership and how we need to move away from this inherent desire to own everything in order to reduce our consumption and shift our mindsets towards more kind of shared ownership models in order to make the most efficient use of resources. But also picking up your point about employment, you know, new business models can mean that there are new employment opportunities. We can repurpose skills already in the workforce, but apply them to these alternative business models. Just thinking about the UK's Environmental Audit Committee published a report in 2019, which makes some really interesting recommendations about how to make fashion consumption more sustainable. So it includes things like recovering and reselling items customers no longer want. You know, brands can take greater control of that themselves. Hiring or renting clothing to customers so they use multiple times. Developing these subscription models which enable customers to swap clothes. But incentivize retailers to use those garments many, many times before disposing of them. And actually, I came upon a McKinsey report called The State of Fashion that they published last year in 2019. And they've done a very interesting coronavirus update to this report, which suggests that the pandemic will bring values around sustainability into sharp focus in this sector. It will intensify discussions and further polarize views around materialism, overconsumption, and irresponsible business practices. So the COVID health crisis has forced us to adapt our lives drastically in a short space of time. And to Anya's point, you know, we've done it, but now we need to approach the changes that we've made, the changes we need to make to tackle the climate crisis with the same urgency as we have the COVID crisis. But bear in mind, sustainability of your brand is going to be even more critical as a differentiator when competing for consumer spend in the tough post-COVID economy. And we can't, you know, be in this panel discussion without talking about the inclusivity. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement right now is at the top of the agenda. Accessibility to goods and services has to be a priority across all walks of life, not just for the privileged few.
Absolutely. And I'd like to pick up on one of your points, actually, Paula, which is about innovation. Sometimes it's not always, well, no, it's not always with, that's not probably well phrased, but, you know, in terms of materials. So I know firsthand that when Anya's team was creating the I Am a Plastic Bag, Anya, you went through all this research in terms of leather, like, you know, in terms of the trims. and you went through a very long journey into finding what could be the best alternative. But I'll let you tell firsthand what is the rest of the story, because that was super interesting when you kind of shared that with us.
Well, it was sort of surprising to us too. So just 2 minutes on the bag. So the bag is made from, each bag is made from 32 half-litre recycled plastic bottles, and it's a long process, but it's really interesting actually, and real modern craftsmanship in a really nice way. And then we actually we needed to coat it. It behaved so much like a beautiful cotton. We actually needed to find a way to coat it, to protect it, and we managed to extract PVB, which is the plastic that goes between the glass windshields, and to repurpose that to use it as a coating. So it's completely a recycled piece, which is lovely. But we were struggling because obviously the handles and the trim normally would be in leather. So I started out thinking about, can I use recycled leather? But in fact, that really is just leather mashed up and then mixed back with virgin plastic. So that was not ideal. And then we looked into, I mean, so many different versions. We looked into obviously vegan leather, which in fact is pretty much just plastic. There's some really interesting new mushroom leathers and a few other things that are super interesting. They're not there yet. My customer wouldn't like them yet. They're not frankly nice enough or sort of stable enough yet, but really getting there. So that's on our sort of, really watch, and we will keep amending this product as we can. But bizarrely, and against what I had imagined, we came full circle back to leather, which is not stupid. I mean, leather is a byproduct of the meat industry, which is still, very much alive and well, and that's a bigger topic. But whilst it is, we might as well actually use these skins rather than throw them away. So we spent a lot of time finding skins where we had transparency of the hides. So we knew there was no deforestation, and therefore they were locally reared and locally tanned, and obviously tanned in a way, the best way possibly, work with gold standard working leather group tanneries. So, it wasn't where I expected to be. I'm not still sure that it's totally perfect, but actually it's the best there is now. And it made it quite clear to me that it's very easy, to your point actually, Paula, that, often what you think is innovative and new can often be really polluting. So you really need to dig down actually and apply common sense, which I think is there are two words that are really important, because it's so jingoistic to say leather's bad and meat's bad and so on. But actually, I'm not convinced. I mean, clearly, if it's contributing to deforestation, and there's a raft of other things, but if it's actually quite naturally reared, sometimes I think you need animals to work on the soil and so on. So I think we all need to do a lot of thinking, and frankly, speaking to a lot of experts on that journey, no one really knew the answer either. I was really sort of trying to find my way through. So it's a conversation we need to have really openly and honestly. And I think the really key thing that I learned is that I'm not perfect. My business is not perfect. I don't think you can be perfect. All I'm trying to do is chip off the things that I can do as I can. Some of them I can't do immediately because I can't afford to. Some of them I can do absolutely tomorrow. And I think it's really important to sort of say, I'm doing something and I'm going to get better and better and better, but don't be scared to not be perfect and therefore not start. I mean, they always say perfection is the enemy of good. And I think that's right. So we just need to kind of keep doing what we're doing, try to do the best we can, go on the journey, be really open and honest about it. And actually people are quite supportive if you do it that way, I think.
Thank you so much, Anya, for the inspiration. And also, worth to say that a lot of that innovation, you are kind of using it into the other areas of the business. It's not just stays on one product, it actually goes across your entire business. So, I mean, we are very close to the Q&As, but I have one more question. So please, everybody, feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box. But I have one more question that actually to the three of you, which is, this is a pivotal moment in time. Addresses intersectional environmentalism is absolutely crucial for a true sustainable future. What actions do you think businesses should take, not just to protect vulnerable communities, but also to take action towards social justice and equality? I mean, this is a kind of very topical business today. So I don't know who would like to address the question.
I mean, as I'm unmuted, I can just think about my 2 pennies worth. I think, this again goes back to common sense. I mean, know your supply chain is really sort of first and foremost. Know your community that you work within and with. And I think that's the first thing to really dig into. Unless you actually know what you're dealing with, you can't solve it. And I think it's then about, it's about community, it's about fairness, it's about diversity, of course. And I mean, touching on diversity, which is obviously so brilliantly critical and top of all of our agendas right now. It's funny, it's a bit like fun of women, and I remember going through the same argument with women on boards, and you need to sometimes do, I mean, I hope, I'm colourblind, I don't think about people's colour, whether dark hair, short hair, dark skin, I don't notice it, but if they're good, they're good, if they're kind, they're nice, that's what I notice. However, it's not fair and it's not balanced, actually. We all know that, and my business isn't perfect, and we're really working really hard on this. I think we're naturally quite good, but we could be better, certainly. And so actually, sometimes you just have to give it a little shunt to actually make it happen. And that's not always the easiest thing. And sometimes that can even be at a price to business, because, you know, but it has to be done. It has to be right. It has to be fair. So I think, you know, it's common sense. And for me in the supply chain, really about knowing what you're dealing with. And sometimes that's not always easy, actually.
Thank you very, very, very much. And thank you, Paula and Rhiannon, also for your input in all of this. And to keep to schedule, I like to go to Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them there. So this is from Rachel. How can we buy the bag and support this? I know that you are not doing a push on this, but I would love to buy the bag. Where can I get it? That's clearly for Anya.
Well, thank you. Just think about the bottles you're saving from landfill. I just say that this project, by the way, is almost not profitable. I think it's probably not. Actually, I haven't done the sums. Certainly, every time we receive the bolts of fabric, which is so complicated, because of course all the raw material is different. The bottles all arrive. We repurpose them, make them into pellets, melt them down, and then weave them and make them into fibres and so on. And every time that the bolts of fabric arrived, they were all different thicknesses, and it's been an absolute head wreck. So, but thank you therefore for supporting the project. If you go to our website, anyahindmarch.com, you will see them there. Of course, Italy was closed, so they're frantically stitching now, and they should be delivered soon. So thanks for the support.
Although I would just warn that so many of them are already on wait lists, so you'll have to add your names to the wait list.
I know, that's mainly because the Italians were closed. I tell you what's been lovely is the people who ordered them have actually waited, because I've been so worried about the craftsmen who, you know, they are desperate for these orders as well. So actually the lovely thing is people are standing by, because we need to also protect our workers. That's one of the really important things too.
Thank you. This is from Salma. With so much of clothing and materials that are now unused or waste, what if WWF collaborate with brands and recycle them that can be purposeful for the environment? I don't know how to answer that or how to even read that.
I will try and interpret that question, but essentially, I mean, WWF as an NGO, we do collaborate, and we have some partnerships with some very, very big businesses, global businesses, whether they be global partnerships or more local ones, and each of those partnerships will look at different environmental issues and will have, you know, specific focuses. But certainly one subject that has been very hot recently is around plastics, clearly, packaging more broadly, but is extending itself across, you know, materials as well, and textiles and fashion is definitely an area that I'm being called upon to talk about and give opinions about a lot more. I think that, you know, what our supporters and people in the public won't see is the work that we're doing behind the scenes. So I sit in the policy and advocacy teams. So there's a lot of work that we're doing behind the scenes to try and influence and advocate for systemic changes, for new legislation, for policies that are going to level the playing field, to ensure that people are taking the right action collectively to make the planet, so we consume and produce in better ways. So I think, you know, when we talk about these collaborations, yes, it's great that we get to do a lot of public facing activity with these big partnerships, but a lot of our work is really important behind the scenes, liaising with governments to try and influence and try and initiate and instigate those really key changes that are going to drive systemic upheaval in order to result in better outcomes overall. And this includes, you know, my work is very focused at the moment on the proposed packaging policies that the government have got in place, the UK government have got in place. And a lot of that is about recycling infrastructure. It's about circular economy. It's about using less, and it's about, you know, recycling more. So there is a lot of that going on at the moment.
Paula, can you lobby for a VAT break on recycled materials, please? That would really be a game changer. You put that on your list.
Well, there is a tax coming in there's a tax coming in where if you have a piece of plastic packaging that contains less than 30% recycled material, you will be charged on the tonnage of virgin material that you use. So that's on packaging at the moment, but you know, we are pushing for it to be broader across a number of products which we know cause issues on the natural world.
Great.
That's great, thank you. This is from Cam. With regards to purchasing products that are a long-term investment, what would be advisable to those that do not have the budget to buy a long-term lasting luxury piece? How do we encourage them to buy better? Not sure who would like to take that.
I'm happy to take that because I touched on new business models, and I think maybe part of new business models is making you know, these classic investment pieces that are going to last a lifetime more accessible. So it could be that you talk about, you know, subscription models where you don't have to pay the upfront on it, because let's face it, who can afford a £200 pair of jeans, for instance, upfront? So I think it's the responsibility of businesses to really think about, you know, if they want to encourage customers to buy better, how can they support them and help them to buy better as well? I would give that to everyone as a takeaway.
Thank you. This is a question from Andrea. It says, wonder if waste companies should actually rebrand themselves into resource companies.
I spent a lot of time, I can just answer something that I spent a lot of time going to recycling companies around London, which makes me sound really sad, but it's completely fascinating. It's like Willy Wonka's workshop. And it's amazing. I mean, so much of it can be recycled. I mean, really a huge amount of it. And a lot of, for example, the plastic bottles and the milk bottles are completely circular, but like a lot of the aluminium cans, you know, often a Coca-Cola can is, you take it off a shelf and 2 weeks later it's back on the shelf. So there are some very efficient systems, but actually anything they couldn't recycle, they did then incinerate and make into renewable energy. So it's, I think she's right, and she has a point.
Thank you. There's a question here that says, for small medium businesses, it's difficult to meet the high MQ of new mindful materials, besides difficult to source them. Any advice? I think this one's for you, Anya, perhaps.
So for example, there's a brilliant trade show called Sustainable Angle, and that's the name of the company. The trade show is called, you might know, Deanna, I'm trying to remember. I think it's called the Sustainable Angle. And actually they have once or twice a year, they have all the sort of materials that are well sourced and responsibly made. And often actually the minimums aren't huge. However, like in anything in business, I'm afraid, whether it's sustainable or not, when I started my business many years ago when I was 18, you have to use your charm sometimes and keep saying that little acorns grow into big trees. I use that phrase again and again and again, and try and persuade them that if you can get going and they'll cut you some slack and give you a low minimum, that then you will come back and place a big order. So you just have to find your way around everything, but that's the same as it ever was in business, I think, probably.
Thank you very much. There's somebody here, Lisa, said she's excited to read about the new collaboration between WWF and Google on improving transparency in fashion supply chains. Can you expand a little bit on that? This actually is coming out today.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very hot off the press. Unfortunately, I have seen the article. I've just sent it by a colleague, so I'm semi-prepared to take questions on it. But yes, it's really exciting because I think that when we talk about the impacts, environmental impacts of products, you know, so much of the impacts are with the raw materials, how they're sourced. But a lot of the studies and analysis that is done across the sustainability of sourcing those different raw materials are based very generally on averages. So for instance, sourcing cotton from one region is going to have very different impacts if that region has huge water scarcity versus sourcing cotton from somewhere where there's no water scarcity problems. So as I understand it, the new collaboration between Google and WWF Sweden allows WWF, with our knowledge around, you know, environmental impacts of raw material sourcing, but Google's technology, it's a really powerful synergy, because we'll be able to look at very region-specific sourcing impacts. So you're not putting a broad brushstroke across cotton that, you know, on average to produce a ton of cotton takes X amount of litres, and actually that's, you know, that might be acceptable. It may not be acceptable in some parts of India, but it might be acceptable in the US, for instance. So it's really allowing us to drill down on the very regional and specific environmental impacts, depending on where exactly your raw material is sourced from. I think it's hugely exciting. I was reading the article in Vogue today, and it makes total sense, because that's a challenge when now I'm thinking about researching about materials impact and materials footprint. When we can get to that granular detail, we can really focus in on those regions, and businesses can be guided to alternative regions where the environmental impacts of sourcing a ton of raw material is going to be way less than if you continue doing it through your regular supply chain.
Thank you so much, Paula. And this is a question for Anya. Says, you have some images on your Instagram that says this bag is rubbish. How do you think people who don't know much about sustainability perceive the bag? Doesn't that message limit your customers to those who know and care about sustainability?
I don't think so. I think it's a little bit of sense of humour, because I think if you read all around the subject on the same page and drill down into how it's made, that they'll probably realise it's a little bit of a joke. It's a dig at the fact it's made out of things that would have gone into landfill. So I hope that they'll have a sense of humour as well. It's very important to our brand, a sense of humour. So I think it should be okay. But it will make me go back and have a look and check that I'm clear enough. Sometimes we just do that on, for example, an Instagram post, but I hope that it actually means that you want to go and find out a bit more.
Thank you very much. Well, I just wanted to, in the name of time, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to, well, first and foremost, answer all the questions and share your views, and especially to WWF for sharing the movie with us. I know that this have not been an easy task for anyone, but we got there. And Anya, thank you so much. You have an incredibly busy schedule, but thank you so much for giving us time and for sharing your insights. And I just want to say a big thank you to my team that has been relentlessly working through lockdown with no holidays. Everybody's going on holiday next week, so apologies beforehand for some of the things that will go wrong for sure. But I just want to say a big thank you to Claudia, to Katie, to Nina, to actually everyone that has been working completely tireless into making this happen. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Over to you, Claudia.
Yes, thank you very much, Anya. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Rhiannon, for this interesting webinar. And I hope you'll enjoy the webinar. Next week, we'll have two webinars, one on Monday, The Power of Speaking Up, and we'll be discussing what actions we can take on a societal level to achieve equality. And on Thursday, The Power of Nature will be discussing how we can protect biodiversity. So please register today to our newsletter to receive your two invitations. Thank you again for your time today. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.